Education to you since 2007, and we're very happy to have you back with us again today. We've got a very exciting presentation for you. For those of you that are having any issues actually logging into the webinar, or if you want to download the slides, you can do them from our webinar at, from our website at www.itsmacademy.com/download.html. And you can have the slides for today's presentation. So let's get started. Today we're pleased to have Andrew Wilson with us from the Navy Medical Information Systems Support Activity, aka NAVMISA. Andrew's presentation is titled Leveraging CPDE, True Results, True Value. So we're very, very excited to have Andrew with us today. During the presentation, the information that Andrew presents may raise some questions for you, or you might be looking for some additional clarification or information. We've scheduled some of Andrew's time at the end of today's session for a Q&A session with you. To submit your questions, just use the chat window that appears in the GoToMeeting box, which is located in the upper right corner of your screen. Just open your chat window by clicking on the plus sign next to the word chat. Just type your question in the chat log section and click the send button. And feel free to put your questions in whenever, at any time at all during the presentation, and we'll just organize them in the background. We've got a large number of attendees for this session because it's very popular, and Andrew's got a lot to cover. So we'll answer as many questions as possible today. And if we're not able to answer all of the questions, when we do compile the Q&A report and send you the link for that, we'll include all questions, and Andrew will supply all the answers. For those of you who are new to ITSM Academy, here is a quick overview. ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of ITSM education. We've trained tens of thousands of students on-site across the Americas and in our public training centers in Fort Lauderdale, Dallas, Minneapolis, Phoenix, Reston, and Salt Lake City, as well as in our virtual classrooms. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Andrew Wilson. Lieutenant Commander Andrew Wilson is the Director of the Program Management Office at the Navy Medicine Information System Support Activity, NAVMISA. He is currently on active duty and has served for 23 years all over the world as a submariner, a nurse, and a Program Management Officer Director. At NAVMISA, Andrew is responsible for the standardization and quality of IT management disciplines while also being adaptive and responsive to the changing requirements and expectations of his customers. Andrew has a Master's in Information Systems, a BS in Nursing, he's a PMP, and he's also a Certified Process Design Engineer. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So I think that's my cue.
It is your cue, Andrew. We are excited and ready for your presentation this morning.
Wonderful. I'm very honored to be a part of this webinar and given the opportunity to be here and share with us the wealth of information and what the experiences that we have with CPDE. And first, just a few disclaimers for me. Of course, these views are expressed by me and, of course, are not the official policy or position of the Department of Navy, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. And I also want to definitely give credit to CPD, or Certified Process Design Engineers, Loyalist Certification Services, the ITSM Process Design Guide by the wonderful Donna Knapp, and then, of course, the ITSM Academy team has been wonderful and instrumental to our success. And specifically to Mr. Michael Cardinal, who's been a mentor and a colleague for us in our success and in moving our organization forward. So we definitely want to say thank you and definitely give credit to the very, very smart people that have applied or allowed us to use this information. And really an introduction, and thank you, Karen, that was a wonderful introduction. A lot of you will ask, why is this a program management office providing a webinar? And this is really an ITSM-based process design, heavily ITSM Academy, but we really want to see or show how this is applied throughout an organization. But believe us, I will get to the end, you'll see that we have started doing ITSM for our organization as well, and the PMO has been greatly a part of that. When we started, when I asked myself our successes for CPDE, and we started talking about the webinar, I said, well, why would I want to do this webinar? Why is it important to us? Because really, for us, CPD was a very pivotal maturity step for us. We were really looking for an answer in how to measure our performance, how to mature the organization, and how to move forward in what we do as far as ITSM, project management, portfolio management, strategy, business processes. So for us, CPD was very pivotal, and I'll explain a little bit as we go. And that's important, I think, to share to those people that are looking at CPD or have taken CPD and trying to move through it. More importantly, the reason why I think it's important to do webinars is because when I say it's from the trenches, in other words, we're doing it. We're the practical people that are out there applying the wonderful education and material that ITSM Academy, Loyalist is providing us, Ms. Knapp. So how are we taking that? And I think it's important to them to see how we're applying it and how they can use it and where they can take it, for future implementations. And then more importantly, we've had CPD in place, I'd say, for a year. So this presentation was really to be results-driven and demonstrate what can be accomplished with CPD. And more importantly, I wanted to set the context. This is process development. So the webinar focuses on process development, but I also will show that there were results for the organization and results for ITSM. With that, of course, if I'm going to show you that we had results, I got to lay out some bad about our organization and show where we came from. It's not necessarily bad, but it's important for you all to know, and I promise this is all I will talk about my organization because it really is about CPDE. We are a new organization. We were set up probably about 4 years ago, and we have done a lot of transition in that time. The PMO for NAVMISA was originally set up as one of the first organizations or directorates within our organization, and our first primary focus was project management processes. And we knew that we had to settle and try to focus on where we could hit the biggest bang for our buck, and we knew that project management was instrumental to the success of our organization. But like most organizations that are starting out, it was very chaotic and a lot of ad hoc. We spent a lot of time looking at best practices and methodologies, but we tried to institute those methodologies based out of the book, PMBOK. How can we take PMBOK and make it the PMBOK for NAVMISA? And really what we found out is process development for us in a chaotic or ad hoc, we had the right people, but we found that it was very resource intensive, and it was very time consuming and costly. And more importantly, one of the things that we struggled with is when you think that you are the knowledge, then you tend to drive what you think your customers need. So we were really focused on, we're the PMO, so here's what you need and here's what you should use and what you should do to be successful in project management. Now, to give you an idea of why this is not the greatest thing, and I will tell you because I know part of my team's listening, they were instrumental in the successes of what we did. We just didn't have a focus. We didn't have a process architecture or a development architecture to move forward and understand exactly what we were doing and to understand the quality. So really, when we were doing a process, it would honestly take a team of 5 people to establish a process, its tools, and associated rules, and it would almost take us over 3,000 man-hours to write a process or a series of processes. It would take us 3 to 4 months to develop processes and the associated documentation. And really, when you look at our costs and the team that was associated with it, and you've got really smart people, you pay good money for them. It was costing us, on average, around $250,000 to write a process. So, and again, like I said earlier, all of our processes were driven from us. They weren't outcome-based. They weren't meeting the needs of our customers. So we really lacked a standardized development process, and we really lacked in our process development and the use of processes and the maturity of that process within our organization. The other thing, as some may be well aware, and it's not a bad thing, but when you work for the government, it's a deeply rooted culture. There is a lot of how we've done it, how we've been doing it for 20, 30 years. So in that scenario, it's almost like moving large rocks up a hill, and it moves very slowly, and culture change takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of patience. So that history, as you probably can guess, led us into a lot of problems initially with our organization. Of course, our processes that we were developing weren't adopted by our organization. And more importantly, as we were maturing in our organization, we realized that not only was there project management, but we were taking on portfolio management, we were taking on program management, we were taking on service management, we were taking on financial management. We were trying to figure out, and not only did each of those management activities need process, but someone needed to understand the integration of all those processes and how it worked to meet the life cycle, or how our services moved through our organization and how we delivered that to our customer. So the inability to meet our organizational demand was we weren't keeping up. We weren't able to meet the process needs of our organization. And pretty soon after a while, our command started losing the confidence, or losing the respect that the PMO, its respect in the PMO, and our ability to meet the needs of the organization. And all of this, of course, as you're probably well aware, is we had poor quality processes. I couldn't even tell you the quality of our processes other than they weren't being used. And when you are the developer of them, we're very proud of the work we do. But when you're in your own bubble and you're looking at the successes of what you're doing and you feel good about what you're doing, but everybody outside your bubble isn't looking at your processes or using them, and they have no value, then you have to open your eyes. And really what that led to is our ability to provide the processes needed, outcome-based processes that led our organization to do the work that it needed to do, created a lack of a lot of things in our organization. Our identity. We did continue to understand what kind of organization we were. Are we a project management? Are we a service management? What IT services do we provide to our enterprise? So we struggled with an identity for our organization. The purpose, like I said, when you don't have an identity, what is that purpose that you provide, and the functions that you provide, what ultimately drives the value? Because if you can't answer the first three, then your customers don't understand what you're trying to provide to them, and thus you are providing them no value. Ultimately, the problems all led up, of course, to us in our ability to mature. So we were stuck at our initial level of maturity, and if you've attended CPD, that's the ad hoc or the zero-based level of maturity where you start off. So that was important for us, and I think that was important for us to recognize. So what that led to is I have a staff member that was looking online one day and found a process development class provided by ITSM Academy. And we really didn't understand at that point how our PMO would be involved in service management or the delivery of services, because we knew we were a program management office. So we looked at it as, wow, this is a potential for us to go to a course and learn about process development and learn what we need to be successful in our organization. And that was really an important step for us. So we went to CPD. We flew out to Salt Lake City in July last year. Not this last year, but the year before, in 2011. And Mr. Michael Cardinal was our instructor. And I can tell you that the three of us that went, we sat at that classroom with our eyes wide open and our mouths dropped to the floor with the amount of information and all the, wow, how does this apply to us? This applies to us. I see these problems. That's the answer we were looking for. So much to the point that we begged the instructor to stay after. We continued to drill him with questions, beg for him to give us more time, and we were really appreciative of him allowing us to do that. And really what we came home with is our understanding of CPDE. And I know CPDE is a certification. We call CPDE, and it really is, to us, a process development methodology. So that's how we refer to it. And for us, CPDE was really agnostic. It's in the literature is meant for IT service management, but fundamentally, what we saw it as was a process methodology, and it could be used for process development, not necessarily only for IT service management. It's very holistic. So in a sense, from the beginning to the end of a process, CPDE covered everything as far as knowledge and how to manage process, how to identify roles associated with the process, how to deliver metrics or look at metrics for a process. And we took that and we looked at it as this is the life cycle of how process is. And that was very important to us because we needed to treat process as the fundamental aspect for how we do work at our organization. More importantly, CPDE was, we lived in a culture of let's create process for the sake of creating process. CPDE allowed us to look at how do you ask the right questions, how do you get requirements that say we're going to create an outcomes-based process. So in the end, it's not process for the sake of creating process. It is I'm creating process because I want a specific outcome. And when I invest the resources and the time and to create or develop the process, I know I have an end that I'm trying to achieve and measure the quality that I actually achieved it. So CPD is really, and I have the 4 phases. The 4-phase, it's a 10-step methodology, which has specific deliverables throughout the methodology. And to us, CPDE really provided the skeleton for what we were trying to do. And honestly, we did make the mistake when we first came back. I'll be very honest, because a lot of this is, I want to try to share the lessons that we learned. We came back and we tried to implement the book, just like we had done with PMBOK, just like we had done with our other methodologies that we were working with. And of course, it took us probably about a week to realize that we were headed down the wrong path. And really what we needed to do was take the methodology and create a process for us to develop process. So really CPDE was about giving the skeleton a soul for us and what we called the process to develop process, or a process development architecture. So really what we did is say, you can't take CPD or the material within the course and say, all right, I'm going to create a 4-phase, 10-step process to create or develop process. So what we had to do, and this was important for us, is take the methodology and create a process that was specific to our organization that met our needs, and then putting that methodology into practice, we were able to develop what we call the process to develop process. And more importantly, what we wanted to do is, although we created the process, it had to follow the methodology as close as possible. So we followed the 4 phases, but what we ended up doing was creating, for us, a 7-phase, 31-activity process. And this was instrumental for us. It took us probably about 2 to 3 weeks, I think, to lay it out and understand what it was exactly that we were trying to accomplish. And in doing the process and creating or developing the process to develop process, we standardized all of our documents. And in trying to stay in alignment to the ITSM process design guide, we created the process definition documents, the requirements documents. We created all the documents that followed the methodology and the supporting documents, and we standardized them. And then we created models for them. So one of the things that we could do was measure the quality of the documentation, because one of the things that we suffered from previously, before our process to develop process, was I'm coming over a cold, so if I cough, I apologize. But I have amazing staff members that can write process, but what we were finding was that they would all write in their context of their expertise. So I would have one amazing process developer writing how he thought process was written, and then over across from him, another amazing process developer that would be writing process, but it was in a different context. So when it all came together, we would have different contexts of how we were writing process, and the documentation and everything would be different. So for us, our process to develop process was an opportunity to standardize all the outputs and all the documentation associated with it. The other thing we did is we standardized in our process to develop process all of our communication with our customers, all the people that are related or have a role within our process to develop process. All of our emails were, I call, canned or standardized. Everything that we did to communicate how we did it had specific activities, procedures, and work instructions for how we went through the process and how we communicated to our customers. The other thing the process to develop process allowed us to do is break that barrier of this is a PMO only process. And what we did is in establishing what CPDE or the ITSM process design guide says is establish what's called PITs, process improvement teams. To us, PITs were how do we go out and grab those subject matter experts, grab those individuals that are in the trenches doing the work that need the process, and pull them in and mix them with a process developer that has best practice knowledge, and be able to put them together and create a process that meets the needs of the organization and not necessarily out of a book or methodology. It's taking PMBOK, it's taking IDLE, and taking those methodologies and creating how it works or what's best for the organization. And that's truly what PITS allowed us to do, to get out of that PMO, we're on a white tower, and that's how people think of us. We were actually going out, and the goal for us was now to be a facilitator of these experts that came together to create process or develop process that met their needs. The other thing that the process to develop process allowed us to do was establish a common language. It's amazing to hear how people speak in our organization 1 year later, because there are understandings of what process is. What is a process owner? Who's a process manager? What's a PIT? And the benefits of what process development have done is people understand the language, or are starting to understand the language. We did a lot of time in our planning of our first processes we developed. We reached out and we tried to grab people from all out the organization, because the other goal in not only trying to capture the requirements and use them as experts, but was also to educate them and try to get process development language in their understanding and how they do their work. The process development process established roles for us. Like I was talking earlier, the common language. We know what a process owner is. We know what a sponsor or a stakeholder or a customer is in association with process. The other thing that was new for us is how do we establish metrics, and we built that within our processes that we used using the process to develop process. But more importantly, it was also how do I establish metrics that identify quality in the processes we were developing. So not only were we establishing now metrics for the processes themselves, but how can we measure the accuracy or the quality of the process to develop process. And then lastly, like I was talking about earlier, is how can we take our process to develop process and make it outcomes-based or requirements-driven versus I think I need a new process today. I'm going to go out and create it and then put everybody through the horror of them trying to change their work to align to my process. So just to go through, because I really wanted to offer some of the lessons that we learned and show how we made it practical for us. And please understand, this is what was best for our organization. This isn't approved by ITSM Academy, but this is us trying to do the stab at CPE that our organization needed, and it has worked out tremendously for us. So what I tried to show is some of the steps, or I'm sorry, some of the activities that met the requirements of the steps within the CPDE methodology. So implementing the process development process, for requirements definition, what we really tried to do is go out and capture management commitment and resources in the first few stages. So the first few stages, initiate and plan, are really specific to the project of setting up the team or the project and the scope of developing the processes. So the first two activities, initiate and plan, you'll see that we set it up to do identification of stakeholders, the charter for the project, understand the roles, the accountability, the RACI, establishing a PIT team, and establishing a POAM that it's similar to a project plan, if you don't know what a POAM is, but it's a condensed version that allows the project or the process developer to scope what they're doing, identify the team, and identify the resources that they'll need to move forward into the definition phase of process development. And what we looked at is the output of these activities led to the requirements definition document that was used to establish the requirements from the subject matter experts and the sponsors or the stakeholders and the organization. And once we got that far, we knew that we had a charter sign, a project plan, and we were moving into the definition process, the definition activities of the process. And again, this is where once we moved into definition, completed the definition, had our requirements document, we then moved into our process analysis, and this allowed our team to meet, document our current state, identify the problems and pain points that they were having, and really look at bringing in what is the best practice for this. Do we have any regulatory requirements? And look at, do we need to benchmark? How do we demonstrate or document what we have, and what are our issues with what we have? And maybe we don't have anything. Maybe we need to improve. Maybe we need to redesign. Maybe we need to design. And this really was important. The most important aspect of this part, and I will have to say, is it led by our process developer, it really takes strong facilitation skills, and we had to focus on where can we help our developers learn those skills and how can we better them. So we spent a lot of time talking about that and developing those. We even had a gentleman that we were able to send to facilitation, a facilitator class, and that really was helpful for all of us. Because at this point, this is when you break down what you have and be able to determine what works best for the organization. And this was key because we never did this before, but by using process analysis and process design, we could then create the requirements and the necessary tools or the items necessary to go into the next phase or next activities of our process. And it wasn't about copying idle processes out of the book. It wasn't about copying PMBOK processes out of the book. It was about, I need a change management process. Here's what we've worked on in the past. Here's what best practice looks like. Here's what's required of us based on our command above us. And here's what I see other organizations doing. They may stink, but they are successful in what they're doing. How can we make it better and make it what's best for us? And that's truly where we tried to capture that in this phase or this activity. And then the next part, based on the methodology, the ITSM process design guide, we then went into our design phase, which for us contained the activities of design process, develop the PDD or the process definition document, and then verify the PDD against the requirements from our RDD. And really, we followed suit to the methodology to look at how do we achieve the desired outcomes of the process that we set out to create. So in our design process, we followed with design, process design workshops. They use the same tools documented in the ITSM process design guide. How do we go through and develop process in a team effort that use the subject matter experts and create an outcomes-based process. And again, facilitation doing that because a lot of people like to drive to an end product and they don't necessarily know how to get there. So facilitation, as far as development of the processes to meet that outcome, was key and instrumental, and it was important for our process developers not to fall into that, let's just get it over with, let's just try to write a guidance form. When you knew that you needed process, trying to understand how to get to the outcomes was really difficult for us at the beginning, and a lot of it had to do with education and getting the language out there and understanding, how you were trying to achieve those outcomes and teaching people how to get there. So that was a lot of work for us, but as we've moved on, as we've matured, we've been able to see how that has changed and how people want to be part of those design workshops and understand how to get to the end. Our developed PDD was the document that captured really the essence of everything from the requirements to best practices, and really took that from definition, requirements, and then put it into a document that captured everything a user of that process would need to have to be successful in that process. And really, again, I'm very thankful to Mr. Michael Cardinal and the ITSM Process Design Guide from Ms. Knapp. It provided us the beginning or the skeleton of what a PDD looked like. And we took that and we looked at what was best for our organization and used those examples to create what we needed, what our users in our organization needed to be successful. The PDDs are authored by our staff in the PMO, and what they did is they captured all the information, and then they were the authors. Once that PDD was written, and it goes through several series of stages for management to look at, to bounce off. We do also collaboration meetings to where if a process developer wasn't feeling comfortable where they weren't feeling that they were hitting the scope that was identified, we would try to collaborate and try to work as a team within our process development team to help get the process on the right path that met the customer's requirements or the expectations for management for that process. And really, once the PDD was formed, it then went into that requirements verification, and it's kind of that first draft of that PDD where the PIT, the process improvement team and management took a look at it and said, yes, you're right on scope, this is where we need it, and we could move forward. Okay, so the next slide. So one of the other aspects of us going out and creating processes is we really wanted to be able to measure the quality or test the success or the initial testing of the process that we developed, because when you pull together teams, you really get a variety of subject matter experts, and you can tend to lead off into different directions. So one of the things we want to do is provide an assurance step for us to where we could go in and actually, what we do is pilot the process and take it away from the process development team and the PIT, but give it to someone that's what I call in the trenches doing the work, and allow them to pilot the process and actually try it on, test it for us, test the materials or the tools that were associated with the process. And that was either in a live environment, or we did desktop exercises with them where we would sit through and they would walk through the process, and we would have other people read it and work through the process. And then what we do is, based on the pilot expectations or the pilot success factors that we documented, we would go back and see if we achieved what we were trying to achieve in our pilot. So once we determined if it was successful or not, we would document those pilot findings and then either kick it back to the PIT if it needed work, or we then would move it back into our release phase. If it was updated, everything that we needed to do was completed. We made all of our final updates. We even had a release activity within our process development process that allowed us to systematically move it to a release folder, communicate to our organization where it was. It was in our process asset library. It was available for their use, when they could use it, who the manager was, who the owner was, who they could come to if they felt like it wasn't working for them. And we documented all that and found that if we communicated through various methods of communication, we would probably hit our biggest customer base, and we would move our PDD as our final document to the customers or our staff within our organization. And this was a big step for us because we had actually spent a lot of time before doing continuous, ongoing trainings that we would invest a lot of resources in that training. This that people wouldn't come to, it wouldn't sync. It was difficult for us because we didn't have a release process, and now because we included that within our process development process, it was very successful for us in how we went about turning over developed processes to the users of the customers within our organization. And that was the outcome of the final activity within our process was our process definition document. So I wanted to show what it looks like. I'm sure there are many process developers out there that may be saying, hey, that is the most horrific looking process, but it works for us, and it definitely established the roles and how we went about establishing process, and it allowed us to measure our process development process in the work that we do, and more importantly, capture those requirements and establish outcome-based process. So that's what it looked like for us, and of course, as you've heard me say, we wrote a process definition document for our process development process. So in following that process, a lot of process, we of course had to pilot our process development process. So we knew that we, being the PMO, we knew that there were project management processes that we could, because we were all very familiar with, that we could move through our process development process very quickly. And so we focused on, of course, the 12 major project management processes that are associated with cost, schedule, and scope. And in doing that, we conducted several lessons learned for developers, and we also kept track of cycle times and our assessment of quality within each phase for each of those processes, and captured that in the end after those 12 processes. We also met with the people that were on PITs because we wanted to capture their lessons learned and their understanding of what they were doing when they were on a PIT, how we could make our PIT and our facilitation within those PIT meetings, those development meetings, better for them, so they felt that they were contributing and providing value to the processes they were helping develop. So for us, this was huge when we started measuring, because if I take the time or take the numbers that we actually showed you in the beginning, we were able to take after CPDE and what took us 162 days, be able to look at development time within 65 days. And more importantly, because we were able as a team to focus on and provide roles and the ability to standardize how we approach process development, we greatly decreased the man hours associated with process development for our team. And I mean, you can see, and this is all bona fide information that we pulled, it's almost a 60% reduction in our development time and almost a 92% reduction in man hours for the process development time and for our organization. And if you really think about it, that came out to about a $15,000 or $16,000 per process, and that was saving on average for us $231,000 per process that we were developing. And that's the honest-to-God truth. So it was very eye-opening to us to see how efficient we became and how quickly we moved, and how not only in becoming agile, but more importantly, now providing process of substance or value to our customers. And that doesn't mean that anything we created before had no substance or value. It did, but it wasn't being used and it wasn't being practiced. So to our organization, it provided no value to them. So, and the real value for us and our organization, it really was, it provided that step for us to look at our organizational maturity and, more importantly, the acceptance of process and a standard for how we move about that. And in the last year that we've had CPDE, or our process to development process, and our culture of process, it has become the standard for our process development within our organization. And with our project management processes, we've also ventured into, as our organization has moved into service management, we've looked at, or we've done incident, change and service level management within our process to develop process. But more importantly, our opportunity for customers has increased, and we've also worked at how we do processes for employee hiring, our check-in process, our continuity of operations, or our COOP process, and we've also done our Lean Six Sigma project. We've put that into a process, and our Lean Six Sigma governance process, all through the process and development process. And more importantly, for us, because of our successes and the command, we've been able to expand our staff, and we're very excited because when you take the process to develop process and you're standardized, we were able to train our process developers very quickly by assigning them mentors and turning them loose because they had the structure and the methodology and the process to follow. So for us and our organization, that was of great value. And looking at some of the lessons learned for our process to development process using the ITSM process design guide and the methodology provided, one of the things that we learned is as an organization, and because we were at our zero or very immature because we were a new organization, we didn't have policy. So a lot of policy that was needed to guide some of the outcomes or some of the regulatory requirements or policy for saying, here's how we do this line of business or how we're going to conduct service or provide services to our customers didn't exist. So we found that as we created process, even with the subject matter experts, if that policy wasn't in place, it didn't make it the way to do business in our organization. Meaning we didn't want to force process, but if it wasn't in policy, then we had people that didn't feel they needed to follow process, whether they believed it was our processes or not, because we always gave them the opportunity to say, if this process doesn't work in development, then we can take it back and redesign or improve that process to make it work for what's best for the organization. So that was important, and we still struggle with policy, but as we mature as an organization, the organization is understanding that policy is important, and we're moving through what that means for our organization. As far as executive support, I say that we spent a lot of time educating, and I think we still do spend a lot of time educating and re-educating our executive staff to understand that you can't, how do you get away from firefighting and relying on heroes and adopting process so that those heroes and what they know, you can create a standard way of doing business and have everybody within your organization follow that process. But not only that, then you have a knowledge management system. You also have a quality management system that you can measure that and look at training, competency. How can you go about adopting what those heroes do and then not make it firefighting but make it a standard of practice. And then the last lesson that I tried to just pick 3 out of the big ones that we had. It takes time to change culture, and this was huge for us. And I, because I really like to fly, was hard for me personally in that, especially in a government organization where people move very slowly. Culture change takes time, and understanding how to take that culture change and how to get people to invest in what you're trying to do. That was a huge lesson learned for us and important to our success. And that's all I got. Hopefully I was able to share something. I am more than open to share anything that we've done. I did send to ITSM Academy what I call a stripped down PDD of our process to development process. There's a lot of stuff in there. I am very open to communicate to anybody, share anything we've done, share examples of processes we've created, and my contact information, I believe, is with the presentation and with ITSM Academy. And with that, thank you for this opportunity. And any questions, I guess?
Well, thank you, Andrew. And yes, we definitely have questions for you. Lots of really good questions. And also, I want to tell you, people are chatting in just a lot of accolades, saying what a wonderful presentation and how valuable the information is, and just all positive for you. So I just want to thank you. That was excellent.
Hey, can I ask, is Donna on by any chance?
Yes.
Is she? Okay, great.
Yes, she is. And I know just a couple of you, just a couple of housekeeping things before we start the Q&A, Andrew.
Yes,
we
ma'am.
had several questions regarding CPDE, which we don't want to get into during the webinar. But for those of you that are asking, the design guide is available, and I'm just going to chat that link out to everybody so that you can have it. And then we don't need to go into that. So.
And honestly, I can say probably, I mean, I do our organization's training, and we manage the training budget. Probably the biggest value that our organization has had, and I don't work, obviously I work for the Navy. I don't work for ITSM Academy or Loyalist, but CPD really probably, and the design guide is probably the biggest bang for our buck that we've gotten out of training. So that's a big bullet to Ms. Donna Knapp and the ITSM Academy team and Loyalist. We've gotten the most out of that, and I couldn't recommend it even more than I am right now, I guess. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Andrew. I just chatted that information out for people, so you have that. And also, we did put your presentation up on our website, so it is on the ITSMacademy.com website under webinars, and you can download those slides if you want to do that. And a couple of housekeeping things before we go to the Q&A. One is, you know, you're a practitioner, Andrew, and our audience loves to hear from the practitioners because they want to hear, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly because they're preparing their own implementation or in the midst of their implementation. So,
yes,
you know, it's just wonderful for you to share that information with people. And I just wanted to remind those of you that are listening that we'll continue to bring you practitioner presentations with experiences and challenges that other people have had. And we know that you want to hear from that. So if anybody that's out there today listening has a story that they would like to share with the webinar, we'd be happy to work with you just as we worked with Andrew to help him present his presentation today. And then we'll have more practitioner experience being shared. And also, again, I'd just like to remind everybody that the next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, January 24th, and it will actually be our own Donna Knapp, Andrew.
Nice.
And
I'm a fan.
Yeah, and she's going to present on process maturity. And she said, as a cornerstone of continual process improvement is assessing process maturity. So drawing from proven maturity models, this session will provide attendees a checklist of the key factors that influence process maturity, along with a transition plan for each maturity level that describes specific transition steps. As it is often difficult to figure out where to begin, attendees will also receive a template for the process improvement matrix that can be used to prioritize improvement activities. So her presentation is actually going to parlay very nicely on your presentation. Now, Andrew, are you ready for some questions?
I hope so.
All right. Now, we have a question from Greg, and Greg is asking if we recommend or the use of the BPMN for process documentation, and I asked him what that was because I wasn't sure if you knew because I did not. And he said it's the business process modeling notation.
CMM? Is that like CMMI?
I don't know. We'll ask Greg that question and let him chat that back into us.
I know CMMI is another maturity, process model maturity out there, framework for process, and I know that's what CMMI is for. It's a certification.
Okay.
I believe, if that's what he's shooting at.
Well, yeah, if that's not correct, just let us know. And Hillary is asking, what are the processes that you have established through your process design process?
Absolutely. So I don't know if people are still looking at our screen. I can go back. So what we did is one of the things that I've always tried to do with our organization is look at what the business need was. I didn't, and that's kind of what's put us in an interesting predicament. And not a predicament, but we never wanted our PMO to be a project management office. We really, and maybe it was the label or the title of our of what our director was, but we really were there for what was the business need and where did our organization need to go, and how, because I really, in our directorate, have a bunch of thinkers looking out strategy. So we really went out and said, where's the organization going? And of course, I could talk for 10 hours on this, and trying to capture what I could in just 50 minutes was really difficult. And how we went about doing service management processes, business processes, project management processes. But really what we looked at and what we were able to accomplish in the first year was all the specific processes associated with project management. We went out to our project manager and said, what were those key ones that said you could manage scope, your costs, and your schedules. And we went all the way from creating a charter development process, all the way from gathering requirements process to WBS, and broke it all the way down into all the processes they needed to be successful in managing projects. We also then went and actually right before CPD, we started doing service level management because that was a need that they came to us and said, we need some help. So service level management, we started doing a lot of process and service level agreements and establishing service levels, change management, incident management, and I know I'm speaking at the management level, but all the associated processes with those. And then once people realized what we were doing, that's when the business side opened up for us. We were struggling as an organization and creating a standardized way for how people did hiring. Even in a government organization, most of that's laid out, but how it was managed and how people stepped through those processes, they really needed a process to help them walk through that. So how our employees check in, it sounds really small, but the outcome for employee check-in was, how do we make our people feel like family within our organization? How do we check them in so they're not redundantly going to the same people, they're not getting a negative feeling? So we are working on worked on our process for that. COOP, our continuity operations, and then more importantly, our Lean Six Sigma, we looked at there is how do we improve process, but we also wanted to put how we did the projects for that and how we chose those Lean Six Sigma projects, the governance, and we put that in the process as well. So those are the main process. We also got a lot of people coming to us and saying, I need a process. But then when you started asking them questions of, well, what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? What are your requirements? What we found is a lot of people just needed help making decisions, and they didn't necessarily need process owners or managers or metrics. They just needed to understand, how do I get through? And when you're a process developer, I think you're looked at as one of those decision people. So a lot of people came to us for experts, as experts, and said, how can I help do these problems? So we did a lot of that. We do a lot of that now. So I hope that helped. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, it did. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, and Tom is asking, how much did the PIT add to achieve buy-in of the process?
A lot. Now, and we have good instances and we have bad instances of that, because when we first started off, our pits contained, because what we did is we worked in our standardized communication, we worked through the leadership of the organization to say, we're creating a pit to establish this process based on the needs of the organization, the outcomes. Please solicit to us or provide us a member or your subject matter expert to contribute to that. What we found out is when we started is we were getting, and this isn't bad, but we were getting the people that didn't have anything to do. So what you found out is your heroes or your subject matter experts, the people that were working really hard, were too busy to be part of the process development for the processes they needed. So we were getting the people that may not necessarily know what they needed to contribute or weren't a subject matter expert. So when we first started, the pit, that cross-organizational structure of our pits, we didn't start off on a good foot, but once we realized what was happening and the successes of our processes, that command integration, organization integration of people from the subject matter experts paid off, not only in the successes of the process, but I would also say in the knowledge of process development within our organization, and helped us sell it, I think, a little bit more to the organization.
Oh, good. Good.
Hi, guys. It's Lisa. I'm just interrupting for a second because we've got a lot of people chatting in. Andrew, Karen was actually saying BP as in business process, not CMM, CMMI. So now we have all these people chatting in about CMM, CMMI. And I just sent out, if everyone looks in their chat window, I just sent out a little link to wiki explanation of the business process model and notation, which is the global standard for process modeling.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're very welcome. So you guys don't worry about CMMI right now. But Donna will be talking about no, that's okay. And I tried to stop it, but you know I'm having my technology day today, so I couldn't even speak. But next month on the webinar, Donna will be lightly addressing CMMI. So for those of you that are interested in that, come back in January. Happy holidays. All right, back to you guys.
Thank you, Lisa. And Andrew, Greg has another question. He said, has there been a corresponding improvement in the utilization of the developed processes by your customers?
Great question, because I mean, that's one of the things you want to measure to understand if you're being successful in what you do. We honestly, because of where we are within our organization, the maturity, there are a few things that we had to, I don't want to say compromise on, but because there's a lack of policy and we're trying to do that, there is no requirement necessarily for say, the project management processes. But what we were able to do is go back and look at the outputs of the processes. And, excuse me, for an example is, and this is just a small example, for project management charters, you would think very simple, very easy. You would hope if people helped you establish that, people would be using it. But then we didn't have any new projects for a period of time coming from our governance process or Navy medicine. So what we did is we turned our strategic planning process into, as our initiatives rolled off from the objectives in our strategic planning, we made those projects, and we were able to turn that around and say, let's use our project management processes for our strategic planning sessions. And what we did is we saw an increased use of our project management processes for our strategic planning. And how we started gauging that was more people coming to us for asking us where they could find processes when, I mean, honestly, we, as I'm sure as many people in the government understand, based on fiscal years, we're actually rolling into next year, our next fiscal year, where we'll have money for new projects. So some of this we have applied to projects. We have several big projects in-house that we're working on for IT and our service management. So I guess the long answer is yes, we've seen an increase in process use, and what we haven't done is turned on the actual measuring of that use, but we know that it's being used. And I can't give you a statistic on or a numerical value on use yet. We're getting there.
And you will get there. You are committed. You will get there.
And I will say, in our strategic plan, because this was huge for us, it was recognized that standardized process needed to be in our organization. We now have a process maturity exercise, or we're going to assess process maturity, and that's a strategic initiative for our organization. So the acceptance of that demonstrates that we're moving forward and we're maturing, and there's use of those processes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Andrew, I've got some more questions for you, but I have a couple of comments that I wanted to share with you here.
Okay.
Tom said, great presentation, that he loved the top-down, bottom-up approach that you used.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. And Wayne said, thank you, Lieutenant Commander Wilson, for U.S. Navy service and for this great presentation. As an IT person and a U.S. Navy Vietnam veteran, I appreciate both. So I wanted to share that with you.
Very honored. I'm proud to serve.
Well, and you know, thank you, Wayne, for pointing that out, and thank you both for your service, because we certainly all appreciate that. And I have a question for you from Donna.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, she said, hi, Andrew, great job. She said, can you provide some examples of metrics that you use to measure cycle time and assess quality?
Absolutely. Oh, wow, big question. So what we tried to do, Donna, is when we created our process, before we never even considered metrics. So what we did is, when we were doing the development process, we said fundamentally within our process development team, we needed at least 3 metrics to say, are they being used, are they being looked at, and cycle time. So we kept it very generic, because ultimately we didn't have a, to me, when you look at metrics, there's very underlying metrics, and then there's your critical success factors and your KPIs. To me, those are where you're trying to get into value. So I could measure all day long if someone used a process, but I had no one was, and this is kind of, again, based on the maturity of the organization, no one was asking us to mature process at that time, or even institute process. We knew it was the right way. So what we did is we kept it at a very basic level, and I kept it on our PDD on the example that I shared. We basically kept it at cycle time. We also kept it as rework within the process, because the quality for us was, and I guess it's selfish for us, was whether the process was successful. So when you looked at process, people, and tools, how can we measure quality and guarantee, well, not guarantee, but be able to measure if it's one of those 3 things, I can fix one of them. So for us, quality was it broken? So the repeat, or the go back on the process, the redos, satisfaction, cycle time, and then specifically, if the team, the PITs associated with developing the process, they created their standard metrics if they felt it was necessary for the process they were developing. For process development, though, and the process to develop process, those were the standard metrics that we looked at. Because if I knew, and the other thing I didn't talk a lot about, because I know I didn't have a lot of time, is we tried to roll in competency with our process to develop process. So if I'm looking at people, process, and tools, then I can say, well, if it's people, then I should be able to measure their competency in completing or being a user of that process. And based on their competency, if it was not then I can go back and say, well, they need more training. If it wasn't competency, then I could say, well, maybe it's the process. Let's look at cycle time. Let's look at error rate. Let's look at redo. And then go back and do a process of improvement. And then same with tools. I can go back and say, was it training? Was it the process? And was it the output not meeting the needs of the requirements? And then that was the other thing that we tried to look at in measuring is our quality for us was, did we hit the requirements? And we tried to hit that with piloting and then use when it was in production. And I hopefully answered Donna's questions. Hello? Is it just me? Hello?
Yes, Andrew, I'm sorry. I have myself muted.
Oh, okay.
I think you did. If she has another question, she'll chat it in for us.
Perfect.
But again, I'm getting just wonderful feedback about your presentation here. I have one from Leslie that said this was gold.
And again, like I said, I'd be happy to share with anything we did. I firmly, and our team firmly believes that the pain and suffering that we went through shouldn't have to, you should, as an organization, feel some of it as you figure out what your organization, and I can hand over our stuff, but it's for our organization. We actually have spent a lot of time going to other organizations within our area, and the first thing that they always ask us for is our processes, our tools, and we sit down with them and have to educate. We're happy to share those with you, but they are for our organization, and you'll have to develop yours for your organization. That's sometimes hard because a lot of people want to get to the easy answer.
Well, and you talked in your presentation, Andrew, about the support from upper management.
Yes, ma'am.
The top-down support. And you said that that's still kind of ongoing and reinforcing.
Absolutely.
But how critical has that been in your process?
It's very critical, and I'll have to reiterate, because it's a military or DoD organization, we have turnover on a regular basis. Just for example, the department head of services, our enterprise services, here what we thought for 2 years to continue doing what he's doing and us working with him is leaving within a few weeks to go be on a ship. So how do you continue to do that turnover? It's crucial. So for us, when I say ongoing in respect to we have turnover, we have to continue to provide that education and try to continue to keep their support and investment in these types of bettering activities, because we are an operational focused organization. We are still a firefighting organization. Breaking away from that mold is that culture change. So it's pivotal to answer your question, to keep them informed and keep them educated. One of the things that we did with ITSM Academy, and again, I don't work for ITSM Academy, but they were instrumental in sending in someone that had, and I think Karen, you all could reiterate it, is they have an ITS, or an IDLE for Executives class that was instrumental to our staff, because I honestly had a financial officer that didn't understand how he fit in the big picture of how we provided services, because they have an infrastructure for how they do financial management in the government. So how do I fit in with IT services? And that was a big help in trying to leverage that support, and ITSM Academy was a big hit for us for that. So crucial.
Very crucial, yes. Thank you. And Mike wanted me to tell you that he was very happy to be part of that journey with you.
Absolutely. Oh, he's on too.
He was. He actually had to hop off because he's teaching this afternoon.
Oh, no problem.
Yes, and Donna said that was excellent. That was exactly the answer that she was looking for, and she wanted me to let you know that we have templates on our website.
Perfect. I live on your website.
Good. Good.
And Karen, I'm sorry, it's Lisa again. I just chatted all the link to the sample process templates.
Thanks, Lisa.
I just can't stop talking today.
Oh, well, we're happy to have you join us. And Tom wanted to say, at last, tax dollars well spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a big thing for us. We were trying to reduce redundancy and resource waste, and that was huge for us. So,
well done, Andrew. And Andrew, that is all the questions that I have for today.
Perfect.
But I've got more thank yous and excellent presentation and great presentation, and people are just thrilled. So thank you so much for joining us today and for doing the webinar.
Well, thank you for allowing me to. And again, if anybody has any further questions, feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy. I love talking about it, and we're here to help support as much as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays to you all, too. Take care.
Yes, and happy holidays to everyone. And just another quick reminder that Donna Knapp is going to be presenting process maturity for us, again, on Thursday, January 24th. I know some of you have already registered for that, and those of you that haven't will be getting an invitation from us. So we hope to see you then. And again, happy holidays, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.